Welcome to the Vue Diagram tutorial. In this video, I will show you how to customize the Vue Diagram component and its elements. You will see how to customize the diagram canvas with page size, orientation, page breaks, add multiple pages, and more. You will also see how to customize the appearance of nodes and connectors. First, I open a Vue application containing a diagram component with nodes and connectors that renders a flowchart. To learn more about integrating the diagram component into a Vue application, please check the Getting Started video linked in the card above and the description below. Let me run this application using the npm run dev command. The diagram canvas renders with the specified flowchart. Let me first customize the diagram page settings to an A4 page size. In the diagram component, bind the page settings property with a property name. In the data function, define the page settings property with an object. Within it, set the height property to 842 and width to 595. To see the page breaks, I define the show page breaks and set the value to true. I create a breathing space around the diagram by setting the margin property to 20 pixels in all directions. To differentiate the page area from others, I set the background color with a custom color. Look at the diagram canvas rendered with the defined A4 page dimension with margin settings in the background color. The default orientation is landscape, which means the page is wider horizontally than vertically. To render the diagram in portrait orientation, in the page settings property, I set the orientation property to portrait. The page is rendered in portrait orientation where the vertical dimension is more than the horizontal. Next, I want to create multiple pages to fit all the nodes and connectors. When I print or export the diagram, the elements that exceed the page size will be added to the next page. This can be achieved using the page setting, enabling the multiple page property. When any node renders beyond the page boundary, a new page will be created. Grid lines are a pattern of lines drawn behind the diagram elements that provide visual guidance when dragging and arranging the objects on the diagram surface. By default, the diagram canvas displays all the grid lines. You can also display the canvas with horizontal lines, vertical lines, without any lines, and more. In this example, I will display the diagram canvas without grid lines. In the diagram component, bind the snap settings property with a property. In the data function, define the snap settings property with an object. Within it, define the constraints property with the snap constraints enum value none. Note that the snap constraints enum is imported in the Syncfusion EJ2 Vue Diagram statement. You can see the diagram canvas rendered without any grid lines. So far, you have seen how to customize the diagram canvas. Now I will show you how to customize the appearance of nodes. To achieve this, in the diagram component, I add the getNodeDefaults property with a callback method name. This method will be called whenever a node is created. To implement this method in the export default statement, I use the methods property and implement the getNodeDefaults method by receiving the node as a parameter. To customize the node style, I add the style property and set the fill property to light green, stroke color to orange, stroke width to 3, and stroke-array to 7,7. The fill property applies background color to the node, stroke color applies the border color, stroke width is the width of the border, and stroke-array is the pattern of the stroke. You can see that the nodes are customized with the specified styles. Next, I will show you how to apply a gradient style to the nodes. The available gradient style types are linear, radial, and none. In the node's style property, I define the gradient property and set the type to linear. Then, I create a new linear gradient brush with a start point of 0 for both x1 and y1 properties, which indicates the beginning of the gradient line at coordinates 0, 0. I set the endpoints to 50 for both x2 and y2 properties, which defines where the gradient line ends at coordinates 50, 50. Next, I need to define the gradient stops property to achieve a smooth color transition. This involves setting colors for the transition and specifying where each color starts and ends along the gradient line. I define the stops property and set an array of objects. Within it, I set the first gradient stop with the color white and an offset of 0, meaning it starts at the beginning of the gradient line at 0, 0 defined by x1 and y1 properties. Then I set the second gradient stop with a custom color and an offset of 100, meaning it appears at the end of the gradient line, which is at the coordinates 50, 50 defined by x2 and y2 properties. This offset value ensures the color transition reaches its final color at the endpoint of the gradient line. You can see the linear gradient appearance of the nodes with the defined colors. Similarly, you can apply a radial gradient appearance by setting the appropriate properties. The nodes are positioned based on the offset x and offset y values. By default, the offset values represent a distance between the origin of the diagram's page and the center of the node. This is controlled by the pivot property. By default, the pivot value will be 0.5 and 0.5. The distance between the page origin and the node can also be set on different pivot points like 0, 0 for the top left corner and 1, 1 for the right bottom corner. Now, to change the position of the nodes, in the getNodeDefaults method, I add the node's pivot property and set x value to 0 and y value to 0. As you can see, all the nodes' positions have changed slightly, which is below the previous position, and the rotator has been adjusted based on the pivot value of 0, 0. Now I comment out the pivot property from the getNodeDefaults method, and in the data function, comment out the page settings property to explain other customizations. Next, I will show you how to customize connectors. To customize all the connectors in diagram component, I add the getConnectorDefaults property and assign a callback method name. This method will be triggered when each connector is created. In the methods property, implement the getConnectorDefaults method by receiving a connector parameter. To customize the connector color, I define the connector's style by setting the stroke color property to blue. By default, the source decorator is set to none, and the target decorator is an arrow. To customize the source decorator, I define the connector's source decorator property and set the shape to diamond. You can refer to the document link attached in the description below to see the types of decorator shapes. I also customize its style using style property and set the fill to yellow, stroke color to blue, and stroke width to 2. Similarly, I customize the target decorator using the target decorator property and set its shape to indented arrow. Checking now, the connectors and their decorators are customized based on the provided shapes and styles. When I try to select the connector, it is selected as soon as the mouse is in its vicinity. The default proximity is set at 10 pixels from the connector. This means that the connector is selected when the mouse comes within 10 pixels. To customize this proximity, I need to use the hit padding property. To demonstrate in the getConnectorDefaults method, I set the connector's hit padding property to 50 pixels. The connector is selected when the mouse reaches the specified padding. By default, the connector's endpoints are in contact with the nodes they connect. If you want to add space between the connector endpoints and the nodes, use the padding properties. To demonstrate, I set the connector's source padding and target padding properties to 5 pixels. Looking at the connectors, they render with the defined padding styles. Next, I will show you how to bridge when two connectors cross. In the Syncfusion Vue Diagrams import statement, I import the connector bridging class and diagram constraints enum. To inject this connector bridging module in the export default scope, I use the provide option, pass diagram as the key, and set connector bridging as the value. In the diagram component, bind the constraints property with a value. In the data function, define the constraints property and set the diagram constraints default and bridging values. In the diagram canvas, I changed the position of a node. Notice that when two connectors cross, bridging takes place, which makes the intersection smooth. By default, the bridging direction is top. The component also supports left, right, and bottom. Let me customize the direction to right. In the diagram component, bind the bridge direction property with a property. In the data function, set the bridge direction property to right. Now, when changing the node's position, see the bridge direction is right. In this video, I have shown you how to customize the Syncfusion Vue Diagram canvas. You also learned how to display page breaks and enable multiple pages in the canvas. Additionally, I showed you how to customize the appearance and position of the node and connectors. You can download the example in this video from the GitHub link in the description below. I've also included a link to check if you're eligible for our community license, which gives you a free license key for our entire Vue suite. If you found this video useful, click the like button and subscribe to our channel to get notifications about new videos. Thanks for watching.